Good morning. Today we're going to continue with our practice of foreshortening. I uploaded a video yesterday dealing with some of foreshortening's basics. And through more practice, we're just going to continue to get better at this skill. Remember that foreshortening is a way to make things look like they go back into a deeper space on a very flat surface. In combination with pencil and marker and colored pencil, we'll create a final work today. Here you see something that I drew yesterday, and we talked a little bit about foreshortening, how the circular top to a cup, this distance here, is foreshortened to make it look smaller. This edge comes forward in space towards your eye. This edge goes backwards, and the distance between becomes shorter. You see it here. You see it here in the length of the rocket. This area of the rocket comes forward in space towards your eye. This area goes backwards, more distance, and the length between the two appears shorter. So remember, foreshortening means a part comes forward and a part goes backward, and the distance between is shorter. We see it here in our donut. Remember that the area that comes forward can appear larger. The area in back can appear smaller. You can exaggerate the difference in your drawing to be sure that your viewer understands what's happening in space. Here we see my glasses with one lens closer, the other lens smaller, farther away. The distance here becomes shorter. Do you notice how these lines angle backwards and come together? Similarly, these lines here, from bigger to smaller, angle back. Okay? Here we have a new drawing from this morning. Here's a pencil where the lines, top and bottom, are parallel. Here's the same pencil where, going back into space, this distance becomes shorter. The surface, the surface closest to my eye, is bigger. This becomes smaller. Same thing here. Now it's the point that comes closer, and the eraser farther back, smaller. Again, you see these angling or converging lines. Here we see a cartoon character lifting his right leg. You see how the distance from his thigh, along his thigh, is short. Here the distance is longer. Here the distance along the calf is short because of its angle towards our eye. Here it's longer. Here the shoe is bigger. Here, being farther away, it's smaller. The distance here and here, very short because of our angle, or our viewpoint, in relationship to the angle of the leg. Here's a spoon drawn straight above. We see its full length of its handle. This is the bowl of the spoon. Here's the same spoon drawn severely foreshortened. See how this length is foreshortened here, made shorter? The spoon comes forward. We see a different part of the bowl down here. The handle becomes very short. This is what you'd actually see if you looked at the spoon in a foreshortened view, okay? Here we have a flower foreshortened. Normally the flower would be like this if we looked at it straight on. Here we see a lollipop foreshortened in this dimension. The leaves of the flower can be foreshortened so we don't see their full length. And here we have, like a donut, a foreshortened inner tube, bigger, smaller, with a little character inside enjoying his summer day. Now these are things from the pantry of my house. Here I have some honey. Here I have some corn. And here I have some tomatoes. You notice that when I draw, I sometimes like to look for shadows. That helps to fill my page in a more interesting way. And the lines of the shadows can be pretty interesting too, as they intersect one another and kind of link everything together. This is an example of a still life. Nothing living in the picture, but from a real place in my house, the pantry, and real objects, so we call it a still life. Not moving, but still life as far as the way we live it. Notice I used lots of colors, but they're arbitrary colors. They're just colors that I picked up because I liked them. And because my pencils can be made darker and lighter through controlled pressure on the tip, I get what's called a full range from a dark color to a light. Notice the dark of the brown is much darker in value than the dark of the yellow. Yellow is kind of a problem. Yellow is problematic. No matter how hard I press on yellow, this is the darkest that I get. Let's do something even simpler. If you would please find 3 things, maybe in the kitchen, maybe in the pantry, maybe these 3 objects that we're going to foreshorten, just come out of your imagination. This is a styrofoam cup, this is a can of tomatoes, and this is a small bottle of ketchup or any other condiment that might be in the fridge or in the pantry. Notice what I'm doing. I'm going to pick one color for my ketchup bottle, one color for my styrofoam cup, obviously not white, and another color for my can of tomatoes. And I'm just going to use those single colors. I've tested my colors out. Notice how the outside of the pencil does not represent the inside very well. Here's the outside of this pencil. The color is not exactly as you see it on the paper. And again, this color, the outside of the pencil, as it's painted, doesn't truly indicate what's inside the pencil. Knowing this, you have to be familiar with your tools. These are tools, and you've got to try them out. I can't tell you. You've got to figure some of this out on your own. So one color at a time, I'm simply going to lay down a light value. Notice how I move in broad strokes, and I allow my arm to move freely across the page. I can turn the paper any way I want in order to make it easier to get where I need to be. Little by little, I can smooth this out by going over the surface many different times. Now, one side is going to be dark and one side is going to be light. It doesn't matter which. One side dark and one side light, one side dark and one side light. Maybe I'll leave the right side bright, bright and bright, they rhyme. And this side, the left side, can be dark. So as I cross the surface, I go from a darker to a lighter, curving around. I'll do it again, but this time changing the direction of my mark by simply changing the direction of the paper. From a darker to a lighter, being sure to capture some of these nice middle tones in between dark and light. Let's do it here. Because of this curve, I may be doing some adjusting. This area under the cap might be a little darker than this area down here. Why is that? Well, because of the curve, this curves and faces up toward my light, captures a little more lightness, and I'm going to leave it light. Beneath the cap, I'm going to put a band of darkness because the cap hangs over the ketchup bottle and casts a shadow right there. To create a greater contrast between these two areas, to show that one is definitely a little bit lighter as I imagine it, or as I actually see it, than the other, I am going to go ahead and darken right there. So I have a little more contrast. You notice how I didn't mess with this side very much? Now I am forgetting the cap. Remember, lighter on the right side and darker on the left. It doesn't mean I have to keep everything dark. Maybe there's a little reflection in the cap right there. Right there as I go from darker to lighter. And the top can be lighter, but maybe there's a little shadow in the back where I can create some contrast there. So that one's done. Let's go ahead and jump to this light yellow-green. This is a hard color to deal with because it has a very high value. That means it's light, and it stays light even when I press hard. I'll stick with my plan of light on the right and dark on the left. Here comes my darkness, and as I wrap around, it goes from a dark to a medium to a light. If I slow down, you'll notice I spin my pencil in that way. I never have to stop movement. That constant rotation, that constant spin allows me to move very quickly. Leaving the right side lighter or brighter, my dark side is now a little bit darker. Remember, this pencil's hard to work with. What could I do to make this darker? Well, I could, if I wanted to, add a darker color to it and deepen the value, but I'm just not right there yet. Now, remembering that the right side is bright, that means there's light coming in from the right. As the light comes in, it catches the inside of the cup, makes it bright, and then there's some shadow falling here on the left side of the cup. So the inside of an empty cup is handled a little differently than the outside. It all has to do with how light rays strike the outside or the inside, making them bright. The deeper in the cup I go, the darker it will become, okay? So that one's done. One more and then we're finished for this. And this, boys and girls, will be worth 50 points, okay? So I have my color, we see my range. It's a good range from dark to light. I'll start with very light value everywhere. Now this can of tomatoes has a solid surface here. It's not empty like the cup, so I won't treat it the same. Light on the right, the dark, and I can't see much here on the dark side, the left side. Notice how I have to control that placement. There is some darkness here, down here, coming in, probably because there's some shadow thrown by this cup on that surface. We can make it a little darker. There I go, dark to light. And I might, there's the inside rim of the tomatoes. Okay, might darken that a little bit, and I just might leave the rest of this alone. So there you have it. That's my still life using 3 objects, either real or imagined, from the kitchen. I was very, very organized with my color choices, with my placement of my dark values, leaving light values where they should go. This, of course, is not a fantastic drawing. I'd love to see more detail. I'd love to see more playfulness with the colors, more blending, but I'm not going to require that out of you. This is your 50-point assignment for this week's foreshortening. I would like to see this. Of course, all the other drawings that you've done, this is a little complicated, are also, I'd love to see them. Any practice that you've done, I'd love to see, okay? Remember, foreshortening means that one part of the pencil comes forward, is bigger, the other part of the pencil goes back, is smaller. The distance shortens because of the angle going back away from your eye. Foreshortening, okay? Now, you try.